If you are interested in exploring these topics further, learning and connecting with like-minded individuals, check out the 3 Patreon discussion groups available. Just visit theinfinitesparkofbeing.com and click the participate button. I also offer a free meditation group online every Sunday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern. Just go to any of my social media profiles for the link found in my link tree. There's no pressure to be on camera or to actively participate in any of these groups. Just come and listen and enjoy. Join an online spiritual community of everyday people committed to understanding the human experience more deeply through spiritual practices that we can apply to our everyday lives. Join us. Welcome to the Infinite Spark of Being podcast. My name is Keith Welsh, and today we're going to get into something that I feel pretty strongly about, which is decentralized spirituality. This is such a broad concept, and I'm really going to do my best to pull it all together, but Jesus said it, Buddha said it, the Vedas very clearly state it, even mystical Judaism and Sufism say it. Krishna said it, Ram was reminded of it by Ravana, the demon king. Hanuman was reminded by Jambavan, the bear king, and what they were reminded of is that you are already plugged in. You just forgot. And in some ways, I think we're encouraged to forget. So let's talk about it. Let me be clear from the jump. I'm not saying that teachers are bad. I teach, I guide people, I offer insight from my experience. I have had wonderful teachers, and I believe that everyone should have teachers. But the problem is when the teacher or the system stand between you and God. When I'm teaching or doing one-on-one work with people, I don't see myself necessarily as a teacher, but more of a spiritual friend or a guide. I'm not standing between you and God. I'm walking the same path as you, but I might have either walked this trail before or I'm just a little farther up the trail. So I may have already navigated that rickety bridge. So I'm pointing out landmarks, right? I'm telling you about some cool stops along the way, but the path, that's your experience. So spiritual middlemen, whether it's a religious institution or some self-declared guru, often set themselves up as necessary. They say, you can't go without me, and that's where I call bullshit. That's not spirituality. That's business. That's control. That's dogma. In fact, try this analogy. I hate this analogy, but it kind of just makes sense in my mind right now. When I was a kid, there was a magazine about Nintendo games, and it had helpful hints in it, things like that. So if you were stuck on level 4 of some game, this magazine would be like, hey, try this, right? And you looked at the magazine because you liked how it described the game. You liked how they handled the game. Well, that's the teacher's role, right? You like the way they play the game of the human birth, so you want to play like them. Like on level 4, you go through a divorce, and you like the way that magazine or that teacher approaches that level. So you try it their way, right? You try thinking about it the way they think about it, which is great. And by the way, my Nintendo career was insanely short. Once that thing broke, my parents were like, there's no way we are bringing that idiot machine back into this house again. So that was the end of that. It was fun while it lasted. It was kind of interesting in hindsight. For instance, my mom didn't mind if I played guitar or drew pictures while I watched cartoons on a Saturday. But if I just watched cartoons, she'd tell me that I looked like a damn fool and to stop staring at that idiot box. It was like, you can look at the demon, but you need to keep a foot in reality. Like, don't give it your full attention. That's how it eats your brain. My mother was a wise lady, and for you younger listeners, TVs used to be boxes. They were fucking huge. That's why they called it an idiot box. So what happens when you give someone else full authority over your connection to the divine? Well, you stop trusting yourself. You start outsourcing your intuition, your own heart. You lose connection to the truth. And since that has already happened on a large scale to human beings as a whole, we eventually forgot how to feel the divine in our own breath or in our own silence. Now, if you've been here with me for a while, you understand that all truly is mind, as they say, they being the ones that really know. But that our entire experience of the human birth is the result of our own minds, meaning that we experience this birth through the lens of the mind, and that mind is unique to each of us. As I've said in the past, we can both agree that something is good or bad, but the degree to which we feel that something is good or bad will vary. And that's a result of our perceptions, which are subjective. Like if something was really bad and you fell down crying, I might just shrug my shoulders and think, well, that sucks, and move on with my day, right? So understanding that, let's look at consciousness, lowercase c, as a cognitive faculty of the mind, meaning consciousness as a data bank or a bucket of experience or information by which the mind draws from in order to decide what is happening around it. So our understanding of something, anything, is the result of our own consciousness, which again is unique to each of us. So how you relate to something, how you experience something, how you understand something, perceive something is the result of your own consciousness. It's kind of like you only know what you know. Your mind can only draw from data it already has. So that applies to love, money, work, pets, everything, even God. So most individuals have been exposed to the concept of God through some spiritual or religious tradition, or through media that has been influenced by a spiritual or religious tradition in a country. Here in the West, it's very much a Judeo-Christian lens. It's a heavy punishment reward way of looking at things. People with no religious background even unwittingly look at the world that way. One of the key differences in Eastern and Western mindset is that the Western religious systems have a you were born dirty, born sinner, you need to say sorry outlook on things, right? Whereas in the East, it's more of you are part and parcel of the divine source consciousness, and you need to remember that, right? You notice this difference even in Eastern and Western Christianity. That little thing alone is a philosophical point. It's a point of view that's huge. I mean, remove all of the religious ideology and just think about the implications of the philosophical differences in needing to fix yourself as opposed to needing to remember yourself, capital S. Now, that's interesting when you think about that as a component to one's own consciousness when it comes to how the individual perceives a teacher, for instance. Depending on their consciousness, what experiences and philosophical points of view have been preloaded into their psyche, they either see the teacher as someone who is saving them, which leads to a centralization of spirituality for that person, or someone who's reminding them, which leads to a more decentralizing experience of spirituality. Now, take that formula and apply it to how the individual experiences God, right? Or how they might approach the concept of God. You see where this can all go awry. So our understanding of things, God, teachers, spirituality itself, are a reflection of our own consciousness, which has certainly been affected by the culture around us. This is just something to keep in mind. So let's move on. Now, first, let's talk about Jesus, and not the corporate Jesus or the weaponized version of Jesus. I'm talking about the radical, right? The mystic, the teacher who said things like, the kingdom of heaven is within you. You are the light of the world. I and the Father are one. A lot of these verses can obviously be interpreted a number of ways, depending on your own individualized consciousness, as I was saying before. But that doesn't really sound like a guy setting up a hierarchy, right? That's not someone saying, come to me and I'll take your message to God, right? That's someone trying to hand you the phone saying, you call him yourself. But obviously over time, that message got diluted. It got turned into this whole business model where we need go-betweens, right? We need translators. We need approval. We need someone to stand at the front of the room, read the Bible and tell us what it says, right? It's like, motherfucker, I can read. I especially don't need some fucking dork in pleated khakis that hasn't really put this shit to the test to read it for me, right? I especially don't need their testimony where they did some really dumb shit and got really scared, read the only book they had, the Bible, and had a moment with God and then decided that that was the only game in town, or decided that they were so afraid of the punishment described in the only book they had that they were afraid to read anything else or experiment with anything else, right? Like, don't lay your fear on me. I'm not afraid to explore. I'm an American. I've got that Lewis and Clark in me, right? So let's go. Take me to the crazy room. Let's do the weird thing. I'll tell you a story. I'm sure I've told you before, but my mother was a Baptist country lady. If she ever heard me take the Lord's name in vain, she'd say, boy, you better call on somebody that knows you. So when I came home chanting Hare Krishna with my hand in a japa bag and 2 thin layers of Tulsi beads around my neck, to say that she was concerned was an understatement. It probably would have gone better if I just told her I was gay instead. So we sat at her kitchen table. My dad was in the living room watching Fox News with absolutely no interest in what we were dealing with here. But she got teary-eyed and said, I just want to know that I'll see you when you die. And I said, you will, Mom. And then she goes, but I don't want you to burn in hell. To which I responded, I'm sure it'll be hot for 2 weeks, but I can get used to anything. And thankfully she laughed. Now, it's easy to laugh at that, right? And to think how weird her belief may have been. But something very important needs to be recognized in that story. She believed it, and it was very real to her. Her tears were real. She thought she was watching her son do something very dangerous, and she loved me so much that it made her cry. But she also knew my heart well enough to laugh and take a joke. We were good after that. She never made fun of me. She never said anything sideways about it. In fact, when she was dying in the hospital, one night she asked me, like, what do you think happens when we die? And I gave her my best Ram Dass quote. I told her something that that channeled being Emmanuel had told Ram Dass. I said, I hear it's like taking off a tight shoe. It's perfectly safe. She just smiled and said, I like that. I thought it was an odd question for such a faithful lady, so I followed up with, I asked her, I was like, Mom, do you believe in God? And she said, I like the idea of it. This was a huge moment and a very, very, very honest moment in the midst of the most honest moment of a human being's life, that she had the stones to say that, So anyway, sorry, I got off track. But with this kind of corrupt version of Christianity that we've really been exposed to, this centralized version, we weren't sons and daughters of God anymore. We were spiritual peasants, right? Hoping that the priest would toss out some scraps. But Jesus didn't directly say, worship me. He said, follow me, as in like, walk this path, do what I'm doing, feel what I'm feeling, know what I know. That's decentralized spirituality. That's direct access. But this is what happens, as we've discussed before. When the leader dies, there is a spiritual power vacuum that usually gets filled with someone that doesn't have the intentions of the teacher. Often they have ambitions, not intentions, right? Even in the best case scenario, maybe the intention is to keep the ball rolling, right? But is that the best thing, right? Maybe the movement is supposed to die with the teacher. Maybe the spiritual lesson is to let go and now go out into the world with this knowledge. Because for someone to take the teacher's position out of ambition or out of the inability to let go, like that really corrupts the lineage. Maybe that's maybe that's the problem, right? Maybe that's where things go wrong. I mean, I've never had a teacher die, right? People close to me have. But for me, there was definitely a moment where I felt that things had run their course, so I moved on. But that didn't devalue what I learned. I just took what I learned elsewhere. And fun fact, none of these things ever contradicted each other. So there's that. It happened with one of my teachers who was a student or devotee of Swami Kripalu, famously created Kripalu Yoga, the Kripalu Institute or whatever. I think it's in Massachusetts. But, when Kripalu died, Amrit Desai took over and, do a little Googling. He started having sex with a bunch of people and things got, upended. I think they kept that going and they just kind of aired it all out. But my teacher, Prem, a lot of her people that would come to her satsang were people that lived in the ashram with her. One of them was a woman named Hamali. And I remember I was on a long drive with Hamali. She couldn't really see well, so I would drive her places. And I asked her one time, like, what it was like when all that went down, and she visibly, she's like, I was 40. I moved my kids into the ashram. Like, she had bought it, right? And then to have that happen was pretty difficult. Yeah. But she was very visibly upset with it still, and I think Prem had kind of just moved on. So now, before I move into Buddhism, I'd like to point out one of the many golden threads that link these spiritual systems, both Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, and Jesus Christ, Yeshua. Not many people know that, or I don't know how they don't know that, but Jesus' birth name was Yeshua, which is Joshua. So Jesus' name was Josh. And we all know a Josh. And by the way, if your name's Josh, you know exactly what I mean. Anyway, they both created problems for the ruling class by simply teaching to folks that were seen as lower class. And back then, these teachings weren't meant for those people. They were meant for the higher classes of people. In their minds, they had earned this status in life, and like you were lower class because you hadn't gotten there yet or you hadn't earned it. You weren't worthy of it. And this was part of the radical and decentralized nature of what they were doing. These were teachings for the people, and not in a gross blue-haired Marxist way, but in a truly we the people way. Now, especially within Zen and Theravada traditions, you get similar messages, right? The Buddha wasn't trying to be a god or a messiah. Like, he never said he was special or godly. Like, he was a guy who sat under a tree, realized the Four Noble Truths, figured out how to be free of suffering, not pain, but free of suffering, and said, you can do this too, right? I'm of course downplaying Buddha's realization. He didn't just try once to wake up, just so you know. Like, he huffed and he puffed, as Ram Dass would say, and got nowhere. Right? He tried every manner of body mortification, starvation, all the silly shit you see those sadhus in India doing, and it led nowhere. He was still trapped in the world. In fact, he only sat under the Bodhi tree out of sheer exhaustion, right? He had this desire to just give up. And think about that, right? He ran himself ragged and didn't wake up till he let go. He left his family to pursue this. He left his station in life, which he was a prince. All of this, he let go of all of it for this pursuit, and it led nowhere. He was dejected. Now, to circle back to the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 1, the yoga of dejection. In Arjuna's tearful, desperate moment of fear and exhaustion, Krishna finally tells him the truth, capital T. The lesson here, we wake up through the pain of life. That's just how it is. Evolution, growth, all of it depends on pressure. It all happens under the strain of existence. So it was actually a really big deal, right? Siddhartha's realization upended everything. It was a radical notion that everyone, regardless of their class, could wake up and liberate themselves. Not be liberated by someone else, but to actually liberate themselves. And that's where the term self-liberated being comes from. There was a time When I would get teary-eyed looking at statues and pictures of the Buddha, it touched me because he was a real person that lived. He didn't know me, but he changed my life. I could never meet him in person. His very real human pain saved me. Trauma responses, anxiety, ruminating thinking, grief and loss, stress, these are all reoccurring patterns in the mind. They're often the result of reacting the same way over and over again. Why do we do this? Because the mind believes the past is still here, happening now, causing the nervous system to respond accordingly. What the mind perceives, the body feels. Mind Transformation and Restructuring, MTR, offers a pathway to release these patterns. It guides both the mind and the nervous system out of these repetitive cycles and into a lighter, freer way of being. If this resonates with you, feel free to reach out via direct message or through the contact section at theinfinitesparkofbeing.com. You don't have to live the way you've been living. Change is possible. Think about that. He took off out of fear, out of pain, out of just afraid to suffer. He left everything out of the fear of suffering. He didn't write a song that I connected to or anything like that, like something I could just listen to and feel better for 4 minutes. No. He distilled the truth of the human incarnation down into a system that if you stuck to it, would change your entire experience of reality. He shared what he knew, and I benefited from that. Buddha was just a person. He wasn't a character that was associated with some spiritual movement or religion where there was no historical record at that time proving that he even existed. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. You know who I'm talking about. There isn't a debate around it. He was Siddhartha Gautama of the Shakyamuni clan. He was a prince. He wasn't some figurehead that we know nothing about or can sit and debate about who he was, where he came from, where did he die, what did he do with his life, what happened. We know who he was. We know where he came from. He was real. He had a name, a family. His story is so fucking powerful because it is rooted in his fear of being alive. He was afraid of the suffering that was coming, so he tried to escape it, just like all of us, but then realized he couldn't. He wasn't the first, but he was the first to write it down and create a system out of it. Buddhism came out of Siddhartha's very human response to life. What other religion can say that? All of these other religions are predicated on the founder being supernatural or having some supernatural experience, and worse, you need to believe in those things if you want this system to work for you, but not Buddhism. Sure, right? There's stories, but those stories kind of came afterward, and they certainly aren't the cornerstone of Buddhism. They're known as metaphors, as allegories. It's funny. One time, a very, let's say, dedicated Christian fellow that I used to work with made a comment when he overheard someone asking me about Lama Losan and everything I was doing with him. We're in the break room. And this gentleman interjected with, "We know where Buddha was buried. We can find the body, but you can't find Jesus's body." To which I replied, "That's because Buddha was real." Now, to be fair, he obviously didn't know about Buddha's bones and his teeth. And just so you're all aware, Buddha wasn't buried. He was cremated and his teeth and bones were distributed under stupas. So Buddhism doesn't say you need to pray to Buddha. It says be awake like the Buddha. That's what he taught. Wake up from the illusion. Look directly at your mind, your suffering, your attachments, and let them go. Not if you believe in the supernatural identity of Siddhartha Gautama, he will let your problems go for you. No, he said, do it yourself. In fact, there's a saying in Zen Buddhism, if you meet Buddha on the road, kill him. It's an odd statement, but what it means is don't worship the image. Don't cling to the teacher. The truth is within you. Don't give your power away to anyone, not even the Buddha himself. Now, let's talk about Hinduism, specifically Advaita Vedanta. It's a philosophy within Hinduism, and it's very clear. It is, you are not separate from the divine. The Atman, your soul, is Brahman, the absolute. They say, Tat Tvam Asi, you are that. Again, we're not seeing this chain of command where you have to go through layers of hierarchy to reach God. The ancient texts say that they say the opposite of that, right? That you are the thing you seek. You just have to remember. See, we're back to the idea of remembering rather than saying sorry. Sure, there are teachers and scriptures and practices, but their purpose is to remove the veil. Not to act as a permanent middleman, right? This was the problem with the westernized version of Vaishnavism, or what is known as ISKCON, the International Society of Krishna Consciousness, or what's simply known as the Hare Krishna movement. Some of the Westerners that tried to take Prabhupada's place after he died tried to become the middlemen between devotees and Krishna, God. It didn't go well. They were sick. They were really fucking sick. They abused children. They even murdered their own devotees that didn't go along with the program. There's a great documentary about it. It's called Krishna's Murder or something. I don't know. But it's on one of the platforms. I want to say Peacock. But either way, the purity of that movement is too strong. And so their reign obviously didn't last. You see, us Westerners have an epigenetic urge to create or anoint a middleman. It's just, or to become the middleman, right? And that's just something that we have to be keenly aware of at all times. It's part of our karma. And I wouldn't blame Protestantism as much as I'd blame, the other one, you know who. So Prabhupada, the man that brought Krishna to the West at the ripe old age of 70, and by the way, took a steamship from India and apparently had 4 heart attacks at sea, he didn't believe that he was special, right? He saw himself just as a sannyasi that was doing what his teacher wanted, which was to bring Krishna to the people in the West. And if you enjoy this podcast and the things I do, just know that if he hadn't, I wouldn't be doing any of this. So Prabhupada is yet another one of those faces that if I stare at too long, I get very emotional. He was a real man. He had a real wife. He had real kids. He had a life. And at the age of 70, brought this electrical current to the West so that we could plug in and get what he had. He said, chant for 30 days and your life will change. Well, here we are. I plugged in, and because of that, I finally felt as though I had a direct relationship with God. And, even after being in a church my entire life. Now, I'm not saying this could be or should be the case for everyone, but for my particular karma, it was perfect. Now, even in Islam, specifically the Sufi tradition, the Quran says a lot, but we're going to keep it light today. But it says, we are closer to you than your jugular vein. Now, you might be wondering, if Islam is monotheistic, why would God use the word we to identify himself? Well, apparently it was a pretty common linguistic device. Roman emperors used it. Queen Victoria used it. For some, it indicates glory, opulence, and royalty. But here we are again, having to explain something in a religious document to make it make sense. So let's just get through it. Anyway, Sufi poets like Rumi, Hafiz wrote about this ecstatic inner union with God. Not a God in a faraway place or on a throne, but a lover in your heart. In fact, Rumi talks a lot about that closeness to God. Sufism is very interesting, and it's kind of it incorporates a lot of different things. It wasn't specifically Islamic. You could call it the mystical end of Islam. Anyway, but it's a very intimate description. Kabir is another great Sufi. So if you want that kind of inspiration, right, then I'd go straight to the writings of Rumi, Hafiz, or Kabir. In fact, I used to go to sleep listening to the writings of Kabir on my phone under my pillow. And another fun fact, I stole a book of Rumi's poetry from the Barnes & Noble that used to be on PGA Boulevard in Palm Beach Gardens when I was 18 or 19, and I still have it today. It's called Open Secret. Actually, when I was a kid, I only stole books. Many of them I still have, so there you go. I'm 48. I guess I'm outside of the... Oh, shit. I hope I'm outside of the whatever the fuck it is they used to prosecute people. Anyway. Now, you see this a lot amongst the Abrahamic religions, right? You have these texts that advocate various levels of humiliation, violence, misogyny, but then you have these mystics that emerge from these religions that seem to have a very different take on it, right? Again, Rumi, Hafiz, Kabir. You see this a lot with Christian monks like Thomas Merton, Father Thomas Keating, Richard Rohr, and Christian mystics like Meister Eckhart. I mean, if they had given a sermon in a church that included the content that they wrote about, they would have been run out on a rail. Now, for my money, I'm going to trust the monks, not this guy. Again, pleated khakis, it's a theme, like moosey hair, tucked in striped polo, beady little black eyes. I'm not going to trust that guy. And as for Judaism and Islam, look, we can't make fun of them. They're very sensitive. They'll start crying and probably stab somebody, namely me. So I love you. You're great. And everything you guys do makes sense. None of it's archaic. It's perfect and very timely. Love the hat. Love the beard. Nightgowns should always be worn during the day. Okay. Now, this wouldn't be a full episode without a rant. But this is something that I think needs to be addressed. It's something that I feel, again, very strongly about. So let me start off by saying this. The Bhagavad Gita, for instance, right? Just saying, doesn't require all of the mental gymnastics where you have to understand historical context, cultural this, cultural that. The Bhagavad Gita is very simple. There's not really any rules. In fact, the places where you think it's going to get really tight and strict, it loosens up. Krishna says things like, the wisest of sages know me to be their own divine self, right? You are all my parts and parcels. And my very favorite, whoever you worship, you're also worshiping me. The thing that's so exhausting about the three Abrahamic religions are all of these kinds of apologist excuses that get written about the violence and archaic rules written in Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, so that us regular citizens of the world don't misunderstand the advocation of violence or why you'd have to eat a fish eyeball while wearing a goat skull in your head for 30 days if you commit some kind of transgression like wearing pants on a Tuesday or whatever the fuck the rule is. What I think is hilarious about these apologists is that they're usually spending all of their time explaining to people like me rather than the people that really seem to be misunderstanding your peaceful message and in turn committing horrific acts of violence. Motherfucker, I don't need to know how peaceful your wacky religion is. I don't need all the apparatus and accoutrement to feel closer to God. I'm good, right? Tell these other assholes that don't get it. You know, the ones that you pay to push your ideology, right? Sorry. Well, I'm not sorry. I shouldn't have said I'm sorry because I'm not. I think this all has to do with centralized and decentralized spirituality. It just sucks that these three organizations, and I say organizations because they're not religions, they're not spiritual movements, right? They're essentially political parties with a theology. At least now they are. And you know what I'm talking about. So don't be fucking stupid and leave me some idiotic comment telling me to look it up and then not tell me where to look it up, you fucking jackwagon. It's just that if you zoom out, right, and you get a 30,000 foot view of the globe of politics, you see a common denominator. It's extremism, right? That's the common denominator. It's as bad as extremism is when it's secular and political, right? When you inject a theological point of view, you really end up with a level of self-righteousness that emboldens the most idiotic amongst us. That's where you, That's where the centralization of things gets most intense. It's not always a perceived middleman between you and God. Sometimes that perceived barrier pops up between you and true freedom. Perception being a cognitive faculty of the mind. We begin to self-censor our mind, our thoughts. Think about it. If our imagination, if our minds are connected to God, and this experience of reality is happening through the lens of our minds, and it's unique to each of us for our own spiritual edification, then tampering with it, controlling it, muddling around in the minds of others is a pretty serious thing. And it becomes a spiritual issue, right? God is consciousness, imagination. It's omnipresent. It is within and without. And that being the case, consciousness is evolving. And we, as part and parcel of source consciousness, God, are evolving as well. And that means that the means by which we associate with God must evolve. This is why these religions feel so archaic. It's like we're all using fucking smartphones, and but the people that are controlling a lot of what's happening on the spinning rock and three-dimensional space they're using fucking smoke signals. Now, where was I? Mystical Judaism. See, I have to be specific and say mystical Judaism, the Kabbalah. It talks about the spark of God within each soul. It's an indwelling presence of the divine that lives within each of us, not a building, not a scroll. It's within you, which makes land battles seem so fucking strange. Sorry, I'm really trying here, folks. I knew this was going to be one of those topics that just kind of winds me up. So it's the same idea. The divine is not somewhere else, right? It's here, now, in this moment, in this breath, in this heartbeat, and no one owns it. No one has a monopoly on the infinite. No religion, no political party that was once a religion, no funny hat-wearing club or bearded group of religious psychopaths has a monopoly on truth. So if all of these ancient paths are pointing us inward, why did the institutions get built around them? Why do we need bishops and robes and incense and cathedrals and churches and donations? Why do we need imams and rabbis and pastors and terrorist organizations, military wings of religious ideologies that are fully funded by their governments that, while we don't classify them as terrorist organizations, they still commit acts of terror and military actions based on archaic books that no one really cares about anymore? Well, I'm glad you asked. Because humans love power. That's it. We love to create structures that keep other people under control. It makes us feel safe. We love to put someone else on a stage and then we put ourselves in the fucking pews. It feels safer. It's easier to be told what to believe than to feel it for yourself. But that safety, it's bullshit. It's an illusion. The truth is that awakening is always uncomfortable. It's disruptive. It's disruptive to you. It's definitely disruptive. When you wake up, it's disruptive to others. It asks you to take personal responsibility, and that scares people. So we outsource our connection to God. We say, you do it for me. You pray for me. You think for me. And then we wonder why we feel so far away from God. Here's the thing I want you to know, and I want you to feel this. You are the temple. You are the altar. You are the priest. You are the flame. The whole system is built into you. Every time you sit in silence, every time you feel gratitude, every time you act on the thoughts of the divine mind, you are worshiping, you are aligning, and you are remembering. And this doesn't mean that you never listen to others. It doesn't mean that you don't read or that you don't study or you don't attend groups or whatever church, whatever it is. It just means that no one has more access to God than you do. Think about that. Let me say it again. No one has more access to God than you do. Think of spiritual teachers like maps, or better yet, like trail guides, right? They can point to the path. They can say, hey, watch out for that cliff. That bridge is weird, but the walking, that's on you. The terrain, that's your experience. The views that you get, you earn those yourself, right? Books Teachings, mantras, rituals, these are tools, not requirements. Use them if they help you remember. But please don't think that the tool is the truth. As the Polish-American philosopher and scientist Alfred Korbitsky said, the map is not the territory, right? In other words, the menu is not the meal. So how do we start to reclaim that connection? Here's what I suggest. 1, sit in silence every day for a few minutes, meditation or just sitting. Just be with yourself. Listen. Don't play music. Don't listen to anything. Just sit. Right? Only listen to the still small voice within, as the Quakers would say, right? 2, ask questions like, what feels like truth to me? What lights me up? What lights me up? Not what makes me feel sad. What lights me up spiritually? What brings me closer to love, to contentment, to stillness? 3, challenge spiritual hierarchies. Right? If it makes you feel small, if someone tells you that they have the answers and you don't, walk away. Right? These relationships should be spiritually collaborative. I remember Ram Dass used to say, he said Ram was an acronym for rent a mouth, because he goes, I'm just saying the things you already know. And I know that you know because you nod your heads when I say them. You're listening to this because this stuff vibes with you, right? 4, trust your experience. If you feel divine presence in nature, in music, in your kitchen while you're cooking, that is sacred, right? You don't need permission to call it holy. Remember, you make it holy. Your belief is the electricity that powers this thing. I've said it 100 times. It's you. It's not them. It's not it. It's you. And 5, affirm the truth. Say things like, I am connected. The divine lives within me. Speak it, write it, feel it. Remember, present, tense, and positive. This isn't about rebellion for the sake of rebellion, right? I'm not here to tear down churches or temples. I'm here to remind you that your soul didn't come here to be managed like a customer. Your soul came here to become awake, to remember, to become the thing it already is. Remember, this isn't about saying sorry. It's about remembering. So whether you call it God, Source, the universe, Shiva, Christ consciousness, Buddha consciousness, Krishna consciousness, it doesn't matter. What matters is that you stop looking out there and start looking in here. You don't need a middleman. You never did. You are the spark. You are the access point. And that truth will never, ever, ever be taken from you. I love you. I love you. I love you. You are the path. You reminded me and I loved you for it. And now I'm returning the favor. Thank you, thank you, thank you. If you enjoyed this content and would like to support its creation, visit theinfinitesparkofbeing.com. There you can explore the various ways to get involved and support this work. Click the About button, read a little bit about me, and see what I have to offer you through the one-on-one sessions. Don't forget to check out the Patreon tiers, where we're building a community of everyday people with not so everyday interests. You'll also find the online apparel store. And as always, head over to the participate button and join us. Together, we're growing a community of spiritual seekers just like you.